Good to go. Good morning again, and thanks for coming along today. My name's Sean Murray. I'm the CEO of the Australian Mitochondrial Disease Foundation. We're really honoured to be able to put this on for you today. Very appreciative to David Thorburn and your team and the Mito Children's Research Institute for hosting us here today. This is part of one of the types of things that the Australian Mitochondrial Disease Foundation likes to do in terms of educating stakeholders, be they patients or family members of patients or people in the industry, about mitochondrial disease. So hopefully you've learned a little bit today. You had the elementary information in this morning's sessions. We're going to get to the more complex stuff now. So I hope you're following. So on that note, I would like to introduce Don Coulthard, who's going to give a presentation today. Don is a director of the Australian Mitochondrial Disease Foundation, and Don has agreed to share his story today about his experience in living. He's having a life that's been touched by mitochondrial disease. So we thought that might be an interesting change up in the information that's come out today, just to hear firsthand about somebody who lives with this on a day-to-day basis. So, Don Coulthard.
Hi everybody. As Sean said, I'm probably like a lot of you out there, having the condition in the family somewhere and dealing with it. I think for me though, when I was asked to stand up here and have a chat with you, and it was about living with Mito. Well, I don't have it. Everybody else in my family does, but I don't. So I spoke to my wife, who has had the maternal inheritance, and asked her, because it would be wrong for me to talk about what it's like to live with Mito when you don't have it. So I've asked her, and what she's done is she's not all that comfortable speaking in public. It's something that some people have a struggle with. So she's written her words. So what I'm going to do is just read her version of this, and our journey's been maybe similar to some of you, or maybe different, but I'm sure some of the things that I'll read of her words will strike a chord. And then at the end, I'll probably tell a little bit about my little part of the journey and how I've reacted to the news of the condition. So this is my wife Janine's story. Most of my life I've lived blissfully unaware that the females in our family were passing on mutant genes from generation to generation, and with them the effects of mitochondrial disease. As it turns out, many of my family members have been affected by MELAS, which is I think one of the most common forms. Looking back, my great-grandmother, my nana, my mother, my brother, myself, and 2 of my sons have all tested positive to the mutant gene 3243. It was not until 2004 that the mitochondrial disease was diagnosed in our family and raised its ugly head. Our eldest son, Jonathan, was born 11 weeks premature and had chronic breathing issues from birth, and had cerebral palsy diagnosis at 18. Various procedures and a lot of surgery and hospitalization over his younger years allowed him to live what, in all senses, was a decent life under the circumstances. When he was 13, Jonathan had 2 independent seizure episodes that went undiagnosed. One day at the age of 15, we noticed that he was bumping into the walls, and he was disoriented. So we took him to hospital thinking he was having a stroke. He was, but nobody could quite understand what that stroke looked like. We spent the next couple of weeks in hospital, having test after test, and I'm sure there's plenty of you in here who've gone through the process of test after test and having no idea what the journey, where it's taking you. On New Year's Eve, the doctors sat us down and explained that they were convinced Jonathan had a mitochondrial disease. Janine remembers that moment vividly. A tsunami had hit the Philippines a few days earlier, wiping out everything in its path. This news from the doctor was like our own internal tsunami. What the hell was he talking about? We had never heard of the condition before. The information hit us like a total wave. Not only was Jonathan being affected by the disease, but all of our children could be affected as well. It was all too much to deal with, or too much to take in. Shortly after Jonathan's discharge from hospital, it was recommended that the whole family begin to undergo tests. Sure enough, the disease was rampant throughout the family. Reflecting on the various symptoms of MELAS, it had started to make more sense. Family members had been suffering from short stature, which is one of the common syndromes, diabetes, headaches, mental illness, deafness, seizures, and strokes for generations. Jonathan has continued to experience seizures since that day. He's had one other serious episode, and that was in 2010. He's a mad Collingwood supporter, and we've protected him pretty significantly over the years, but we decided to take him to the grand final, and one of the things with the condition is that you try to measure the risks. So we considered the risks in his health, and at the end of the day, you have to live, don't you? So we took him to the game. He managed to get through the first game. Unfortunately, they threw a replay at us the following week. He made it through the game and hit number 17 on his back. Number 17 was stepping up to the podium to collect his medal, and he crashed at the MCG. Fortunately, fantastic medical services right there, and we had a doctor from the Royal Melbourne Hospital who was actually aware of the condition. So we got to the Royal Melbourne while he was crashing at the MCG, also aspirated, so his lung collapsed. And so we spent 7 days in the ICU, and it was looking pretty dire there for a while. We got him out, and then 6 weeks later he crashed again and spent another week in the ICU down at Monash. Each hospital episode meant a long recovery from the stroke-like symptoms, because they do affect you. Trying to manage his condition is like living with a human time bomb. You just never know when he will go off. We struggle on a daily basis to prevent the next seizure or symptom exploding into our lives. Jonathan is on a concoction of vitamins and epilepsy medication, must eat regularly, and needs his rest. Every time he dips under that imaginary energy line, he runs into trouble. It has also affected family life as well. We cannot be spontaneous, and I'm sure lots of you are familiar with this, because he requires one-on-one care. We're unable to travel together over long distances because we can't take the risk of the flight and what might happen. And God forbid we were in the US and had to seek medical help, because the cost would be enormous. Some days it makes you feel like life is simply on hold. We have two other sons, Matthew 19, who's in the back, and Daniel 12. It has been our decision, and it was a tough one, to keep the specter of the condition to ourselves as they grew up, in order to protect the innocent enjoyment that every child should be afforded if you can. We have recently let Matthew in on the dark family secret, and part of his education is being here today. Understanding the challenges of genetics are an important part of educating him so that he can make informed decisions about his lifestyle and activity in the future. Daniel doesn't know, the 12-year-old, and if we have our way, he won't until he's older. Our friends don't really ask what condition Jonathan has, so we don't tell them, but what we do say is a whole bunch of things, and that usually does it. Now, she's talked a little bit of how she feels. She feels personally guilty. When you fall pregnant, you don't anticipate passing on genetic conditions to your children that will not only affect their lives, but suddenly change your life significantly as well. And you know, in a maternally inherited environment, that's, you know, I'm sure an extremely common feeling. I've had to deal with Jonathan's severe health issues for 23 years, as well as my own mental and physical anguish. And I'll just butt in at this point and say, we know how lucky we are that we've had 23 years with what he's been through, and I know some of you here haven't had that long with your children. I worry and fret a lot. I feel much older than my years. I'm always tired and require a lot of sleep. Some days it feels like my eyelids are weighted down with cement, and it's a real struggle just to fight and stay awake. Often I wake up in the morning to feel even more tired than when I went to bed the night before. I also experience severe muscle cramps, headaches, and often feel lethargic and have little energy. It is a real mental and physical struggle. These symptoms are minor in comparison to what Jonathan goes through and other members of her family have had to endure, but some days it's just so overwhelming. I have to wave the white flag and slow down and rest. The upcoming Stay in Bed Day annual fundraiser event for Mito disease is looking more and more appealing. I suppose getting a diagnosis of mitochondrial disease has helped me and my family come to terms with the various symptoms and effects of the disease in our lives. It has helped us understand each other better and be more sympathetic of one another. No thoughts of, it's nothing, just battle through it. It has made us more accepting of the fact that this is our lot, and without any cure for now, we have to ride the roller coaster of life and grin and bear it. Thankfully for my family, however, there are no more females to continue to pass on the condition. Notwithstanding, I know that there's a lot of work being done so that affected females can have healthy children. We have all had sons, so the buck stops with me. It's reassuring to know that future members of the family will not have to experience what can be a very debilitating and complex disease. It's extremely important, however, for my family to continue to talk and discuss and share thoughts and ideas on Mito disease. Many people are affected by the various forms of the disease and don't even know it. We as a family can only hope that raising awareness and contributing to the cause in some small way will benefit other families in the future. So that's Janine's story, and I think it's probably a common one for some of the people I've spoken to. It's an ongoing battle. If I can just share some of my thoughts. So, when I was confronted with the condition, and told there really was no treatment, no cure, no real treatment, no cure, for me that's something that, I need to activate my energy into doing something. So, I can recall going to after the diagnosis, going to genetic counseling, and it wasn't here, David, so don't worry about that. We were having the counselor explain to us the condition was maternally inherited. She didn't understand it, she couldn't explain it properly. And so I thought, well, if an expert doesn't understand it, at that time, a genetic counselor, how would a layman, politician, or media outlet? This showed me we had a long way to go. One of the things that followed up was we attended with Jonathan, Genetics Victoria here, and met Dr. Bonnet. And I asked in a meeting with him, we were talking about Jonathan, what was happening regarding treatment. And I was given an understanding that effective treatments were a long way off at that point. 9 years later, as we've heard today, there's been quite a bit of progress, but not enough. In that meeting, I asked what I could do. And so somebody went down the hall and grabbed David out of his office and brought him into the room. We had a long discussion, and a great friendship has developed from there. And basically, what David said was, there's nothing you can do specifically for research in mitochondria specifically, but what you can do is a higher tide floats more boats. So he encouraged me to get involved with Research Australia, which is the advocate group for researchers, and we ended up off to Canberra. It was at the time when the National Health and Medical Research funding was under consideration, what would happen with the next 5-year plan. And so we were in front of parliamentary committees, and we managed to get into the Health Minister, Tony Abbott, at the time. And I can recall in that meeting, I was there with a number of eminent Australian researchers, and Tony said, well, you don't have to convince me, guys. We'll do our best. And fortunately, John Howard, who's a great advocate of medical research, committed over the next 5 years a significant increase in funding. Supporting, the next thing I could do was become a board member of the Amdf. I was invited a couple of years ago. Awareness, research, funding, and promising lines of research for treatment are all growing by the day, and the AMDF has become an important messenger, advocate, and financial contributor to the scientists and clinicians leading the charge, thanks to the dogged passion of the Lingards, with the support of the board and the CEO, Sean, and his very, very small team. I guess just in conclusion now, for me, when we started this journey, there was no AMDF. Our family started this journey, there was no AMDF. There was no support group. So I turned to the US, United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation. I went to one of their conferences. We have the AMDF now. The first supporters meeting was very small. Joe was at the last supporters meeting, and now Joe is coordinating all of the activity through the state of Victoria. Victoria for the AMDF should be a more active, effective, contributing, fundraising chapter for our association or foundation, but unfortunately it isn't. But I look out today and I see twice as many people who were out last year. I see Joe who has only joined since the last meeting, and so what I would do is encourage all of you. Sometimes it's very hard to fit volunteer work into your lives, but you're all motivated. You all have a fantastic motivation, and that's because you're connected with this horrible set of diseases. So I would encourage you to get involved. Stay in Bed Day is our major fundraising initiative the things that we've been able to do with the funding we've raised over the last few years in the Amdf. There's equipment in this lab and others that helps David